There's a quiet feeling that all of us have encountered at some point, sometimes during windless evenings, when the noise of life momentarily recedes and we sit there alone with ourselves. Many call it loneliness, but have you ever wondered, could it be that loneliness and silence are actually two very different worlds, even if they sometimes share the same setting? Loneliness for many is a frightening word. It evokes images of abandonment, emptiness, of someone nobody wants to be around. Since childhood, we've been taught that success means having lots of friends, always showing up at parties, being surrounded by laughter and conversation. If someone quietly withdraws from that cycle, people tend to worry. Are you okay? Why are you pulling away like that? And so, loneliness gradually gains a reputation as a failure to fit in, a failure to be loved. But there's another dimension rarely spoken of. It's silence. Not emptiness, but a space not where we are thrown into, but one we consciously choose to step into. Silence doesn't come from being left behind, but from a deliberate decision to let go of external noise in order to hear the inner voice. It's not simply being alone, but rather being with oneself. Like a climber choosing to cross snowy mountains alone to reach the summit, not because they don't need anyone, but because they know that some paths, if not walked alone, will never truly be reached. Silence is that path. It is the stillness in which the echoes of the outside world fade, making room for the most honest conversation between ourselves and our deepest self. In today's world, where everything moves fast and loud, where success is measured by constant presence on social media, retreating into silence is often misunderstood as escape. But in truth, not everyone has the courage to sit with themselves, with no music, no new messages, no one telling them what to do next. In that moment, all the masks fall away, and we see more clearly than anyone else our true self. The difference between loneliness and silence can be imagined like the difference between a door being shut on us and a door we gently close ourselves to enter a meditative space. In one, we feel pushed out, deprived, isolated. In the other, we feel full, even with no one else around. We're not drowned by the absence, but lifted by the full presence of our own being. This is something many great thinkers have pointed to, including Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, who believed that true human maturity begins when we dare to turn inward and face our own darkness. According to Jung, the process of individuation, the journey to become our most authentic and whole self, cannot happen without silence. Without an inner space, there can be no honest meeting with the self. Without temporarily stepping away from life's noise, there can be no deep connection to the soul. The irony is, the more we fear loneliness, the further we are pulled away from silence. The more we try to fill the gap with social interactions or work, the less chance we have to hear ourselves. Loneliness is the fear of being left behind, while silence is an invitation to return. One is a reaction to absence, the other is an intentional choice. We live in an age where every moment of quiet is instantly filled with short videos, phone notifications, endless scrolling on social media. And because of that, those who dare to enter silence become the ones who swim against the current, and perhaps they are the ones who see most clearly into their own nature. Silence at its deepest level is not just a tool for healing, it is a rite of rebirth for the inner self. It is the space where fears, wounds, and desires all come into sharp focus so they can little by little be transformed. There is no one left to perform for, no more roles to play, No more need to act strong. There is only us, raw, honest, and whole. Perhaps the first time we step into silence, it may feel cold, as if we're lost in a desert. But stay, because only when darkness is embraced can light truly shine through. And once we learn how to dwell peacefully in that silence, we realize it's not a place of isolation, but a place of rediscovery. From there, our relationships begin to shift. We no longer connect with others out of fear of being alone, but because we genuinely want to be present. We no longer seek someone to fill the void, but to walk alongside us, both of us already whole. And in that way, silence is no longer a frightening emptiness, but a deep well from which we draw drops of awareness, of love, of coming home. There is a quiet journey, one that often goes unnoticed, and one no one else can fully walk with us. It is the journey of facing ourselves. To enter into silence is not merely to step away from the outer world, but to embark on a deep inner journey, where we come face to face with forgotten shadows, long abandoned fragments, and unspoken desires that have never been named. This is the journey that psychoanalyst Carl Jung called individuation, the process through which a person separates from the crowd, from social roles, and step by step becomes their truest, most whole self. Not everyone is gently led into this journey. Often it begins with loss, the passing of a loved one, the breaking of a relationship, or simply a nameless emptiness that stirs within. Sometimes life appears full, busy, successful, but then one day we wake up and realize we've been living without truly being present. That's the first call, vague but urgent, leading us into silence, and from there, into the path of discovering our true self. Carl Jung didn't see humans as behavioral machines or a collection of social roles. He looked deeper and believed that beneath all those layers lies a true self, a self not defined by others, not distorted by expectations, and not fully seen in the mirror. To find that self, we must be brave enough to enter a place few dare to touch. That is the shadow, the part we reject, the part we hide, the part we see as weak, wrong, or ugly. And this is what makes the journey into silence sacred. It is not an escape from the world, but a return, a facing of oneself. In that stillness, all that we once avoided begins to surface. The unacknowledged anger, the tears we never fully cried, the words we never dared to speak, and even the dreams we once abandoned halfway. All of it rises, not to torment us, but to be seen, embraced, and healed. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In a world that favors positivity, people often avoid negative emotions. But in silence, where we are no longer distracted by external noise, we begin to hear the things that are not easy to hear. And it is there that transformation begins. We stop chasing an ideal version of ourselves and start becoming real, complete, complex, deep, and free. Silence, through Jung's lens, is not just a moment of rest, but a gateway into the depths of the soul. It demands courage not to do something, but to stop doing, to sit still, to look inward, to breathe, to listen, and to feel. When no one is watching us, when no standard is telling us how we should fit in, that is when we truly have the chance to meet the essence of who we are. There may be times we want to retreat, when old emotions rush in like a flood, when memories we thought long forgotten return with full force. But if we stay long enough in that silence, without judgment, without running, we begin to see something miraculous. The darkness begins to soften, not because it is forced to disappear, but because it is finally seen and loved. This process cannot be rushed. It can't be fast-tracked through psychological hacks or emotional control techniques. It only begins when we are truly ready to pause, to let go of urgency, and to listen to the quiet voice within. When we do that, a deep transformation gradually unfolds. We stop seeking validation from the outside, stop trying to prove our worth through others' eyes, and begin to live from the inside out. That is what silence does. It does not speak, but it makes us listen. It does not point the way, but it guides. It does not push, but it makes it impossible to turn away. And slowly we become whole, not because we are perfect, but because we have dared to embrace all our imperfect parts. Silence, as Jung saw it, is the place where a person becomes whole, a being who no longer needs to try to be someone because at last they have realized being oneself is enough. There are changes in life that arrive quietly, not with fanfare, not with fireworks, not like those moments of celebration. They don't happen under the spotlight or to the sound of applause. They come as gently as mist, as softly as the first wind of winter, only felt when we truly settle into silence. And it is in those unseen moments that we begin to change. Not through a sudden, impulsive decision, but through a silent, ripening process from within. Silence is the one place where no one urges us to keep going, no one pushes us to try harder, no one expects us to become anything. It is a rare space where we are allowed to do nothing. And yet, in that not doing, the most important thing begins. We start to feel. We feel the tension in our shoulders and neck is not just from fatigue, but from years of holding ourselves together to appear okay. We feel the ache in our chest is not just a passing melancholy, but an echo of something that was never fully grieved. We feel the looping thoughts in our minds, not because we worry too much, but because underneath them lies a fear no one ever held our hand to face. In silence, nothing vanishes, but everything begins to reveal itself. And in that revealing, raw, fragile, and sometimes unsettling, lies the root of transformation. No longer driven by our defensive reactions, we begin to see clearly. It's not the world that's against us, but something within us that still hurts. It's not that others always cause us pain, but that the old wounds inside us remain unhealed. It's not that we are not good enough, but that we once received love with conditions, and from there, we learn to doubt ourselves. Silence doesn't teach us to forget. It teaches us to stay with ourselves in all our versions, to stay with our emotions, even the uncomfortable, heavy, or unnamed ones, to stay with our own past, not to let it control us, but not to rush to erase it either, because in the staying, something magical happens. What was never heard begins to be listened to. What was never acknowledged begins to be understood. And the parts of us we once hid in shame begin to come into the light, welcomed by our compassion. We've often heard, to heal, we must learn to let go. But before letting go, we must first hold ourselves, hold the parts we once rejected, hold the wounded child within, hold the dreams that never had the chance to grow, and hold even the anger, the regret, the doubt, as rightful parts of who we are. When we stop trying to fix ourselves and start loving ourselves as we are, that is when true healing begins. And that is why silence has such profound power to transform. It is not a tool to escape our problems, but a place to return to. No one comes out of silence the same as they were, not because they have changed completely, but because they have touched a part of themselves they had forgotten. And that changes the way they see the world. No longer reacting impulsively, but listening deeply. No longer needing to prove, but simply being present. No longer chasing worth from outside, but living with gratitude from within. Silence does not promise an easy life, but it opens the door to a true one, true to our nature, true to our soul, true to the rhythm of our heart. And when we live in truth, everything around us begins to feel lighter, deeper, more real, because we are no longer caught in a role, but living as ourselves. In the end, transformation does not come from somewhere far away. It's not found in a book, a course, or another person. It begins in the quietest place. The moment we are brave enough to sit down, look into our heart, and say, I will stay. No matter what happens, I will stay with you, myself. And that is how a soul begins to bloom in silence. There are seasons in a person's life that are not radiant, not lush like spring, not blazing like summer, not golden like autumn. They are winter, quiet, bare, sometimes so cold it cuts to the heart. Yet it is within that cold and stillness that life begins to settle, to hide, and to await a deeper kind of rebirth. Just like our soul when it enters silence. No more applause, no more goals, no one watching, no one waiting. All that remains is ourselves and the bare truth. Who am I when there is nothing left to cling to? Winter does not pressure us to shine. It allows us to retreat inward, like trees shedding their leaves to conserve energy, like the earth cracking dry in preparation for new life. In that silence, there is nothing to prove, no one to compete with, and no reason to rush. Only patience remains, something modern life treats as a luxury. But only when we pause long enough can we see clearly. The deepest parts of our being never bloom in haste. They need a winter to melt away what no longer serves, to let old layers fall away naturally. We often fear winter, not just for its cold, but for its loneliness. In a world obsessed with noise and driven by constant growth, quiet moments can make us feel like we're falling behind. But like nature, no life is truly deep if it hasn't lived through a winter. And likewise, no growth is truly whole if it hasn't passed through a season of stillness, retreat, and restructuring. In the winters of the soul, we may feel tired, disheartened, unsure of ourselves. But this isn't failure. It's the necessary fracture for something deeper to be born. Carl Jung once said, "The beginning of all transformation is silence." And winter is its most vivid embodiment. It does not make noise. It does not try to explain. It just is, cold, quiet, patient, and gently tender. Silence like winter is an act of permission. Permission to be weary. Permission not to know what comes next. Permission to have no answers. And permission for everything to pause. Not out of giving up, but because it's the wisest thing a soul can do before beginning a new chapter. Without winter, there can be no spring. Without the death of the old, there can be no birth of the new. And without silence, there can be no true rebirth. Strangely enough, when we accept winter, it stops being frightening. When we stop resisting silence, it becomes a friend. When we stop avoiding the soul's gray days, we begin to notice the fragile, authentic beauty within them. Mornings when we wake up without the energy to do anything turn out to be gentle reminders that we need rest. Sleepless nights filled with echoes of the past are chances to heal something that still aches. And times that seem meaningless are where we learn the art of presence. Silence, like winter, teaches us something deeply human, that we don't always have to be strong. Winter doesn't need to blossom, doesn't need to bear fruit, it just needs to be, and that is enough. And so do we. We don't need to achieve greatness, we don't need to always feel inspired, we don't need to always be okay. Some days just breathing, just being still, just sitting by a small candle is already enough. Because it is in those simple moments that a seed quietly begins to sprout. The seed of self-understanding, of compassion for ourselves, and of a strength that needs no display. And then, as nature always promises, every winter will eventually pass. But the most precious thing isn't how short or long it lasts. It's that we dared to stay. Stayed when our hearts felt empty. Stayed when no one comforted us. Stayed when there was nothing left to believe. And it is precisely from that staying that an inner spring begins. Quietly, slowly, but more enduring than anything else. Silence like winter, cold, but not soulless, still, but not lifeless, and most importantly, never meaningless, because it is the sacred retreat where the soul rests and prepares to bloom, in its own way, in its own time. We live in an age where noise is seen as proof of life. Endless conversations, constant messages, photos updated by the minute, all create a world where silence is often mistaken for loneliness. We grow up believing that if we're not busy, not talking, not connecting, then we're being left behind, that something must be wrong with us. And so stillness becomes something to fear rather than a friend. But the truth is, silence is not loneliness. Loneliness is the feeling of being cut off from others, from life, from ourselves. It is the longing to be touched, to be heard, to be seen. Silence, on the other hand, is the space where we are most deeply connected, not with others, but with our own being. In loneliness, we can be surrounded by people and still feel empty. In silence, we can sit alone and feel whole. That is the difference. Silence does not require someone to be beside us, because it teaches us this. True presence is not about how many people are around us, but about the quality of the relationship we have with ourselves. When we learn to sit in silence, we begin to hear the subtle sounds that used to be drowned out by noise, the slowing of our heartbeat, the wind whispering through the window, the soft fading of thoughts. And in that space, another sound emerges, the gentle call of our soul, something we've long been too loud to hear. Silence becomes a bridge, connecting us to the forgotten parts of ourselves. It does not make us feel less, but more aware, more tender, more alive. We do not fear silence, we fear what may rise within it. The memories we've tried to forget, the wounds still unhealed, the questions without answers. But avoiding them doesn't make them go away. On the contrary, only when we are brave enough to sit with them do we realize they're not as terrifying as we thought, because underneath the pain lies what we truly need: connection. And it is in silence that this connection begins to return. Silence is not the same as shutting down. It's not an isolating shell, but a sacred space where the soul can breathe. Just as the sky doesn't need to be filled with sound to be vast, we don't need to constantly speak or act to feel worthy. Silence teaches us how to live deeply, not through noise, but through authenticity. And paradoxically, the deeper we connect with ourselves through silence, the better we connect with others. Because we no longer come to them from emptiness, but from fullness. We don't need them to fill a void. We invite them to share in our presence. We no longer search for someone to make us whole. We realize we already are. And because of that, love can begin to grow freely without condition. Sometimes the most intimate moments in a relationship happen when both people are simply silent. No words, no explanations, no effort, just sitting there, present, breathing together, like two candles burning side by side, not crowding, not claiming, simply illuminating together. Silence then is no longer something we endure, but the space where true love begins. Silence is not loneliness. It is the deepest form of presence with ourselves, with life, and with each other. It doesn't pull us out of life, but brings us more fully into it, not through doing, but through being. And it is within that silence that we stop searching for answers outside, because we begin to hear the answers rising from deep within. Silence is not a place to escape to. It is not a pause to run away from the world or to abandon our responsibilities. In truth, silence is a call to return, a gentle whisper from deep within, inviting us back to ourselves. It isn't loud, nor is it urgent, but it is powerful enough to draw us in, to pull us away from the chaos and toward the deeper truths of the soul. We are often swept away by the storms of life, ambitions, work, relationships, expectations, and in that whirlwind, we frequently lose ourselves. We do so much, say so much, strive so hard, yet somehow we still don't feel truly alive, because the most vital parts of who we are have been forgotten. We've lost the ability to hear our inner voice, lost the connection to our truest essence. But in silence, where that voice returns, softly without force, yet with a clarity that cannot be denied. It is the return to a soul that has long been veiled. That is when we stop searching for joy outside ourselves and begin to realize true joy has always been within us, in the simplicity and stillness of the present moment. Strangely, we don't need to go far to find peace. We don't need to completely transform to become someone new. True peace begins with returning to ourselves, to the original self we may have forgotten. The outward journeys, the successes and failures, they are only the tip of the iceberg. What lies beneath is the deep connection with who we are. And it is this return that the soul truly longs for. Silence is the moment when there is nothing to do, no one to convince, nothing to prove. Just us, with our whole, unfiltered selves. And in those moments, we begin to remember, who are we without the layers of protection, without needing to be loved or accepted? We start to see that true acceptance doesn't come from others. It comes from ourselves. And only when we accept ourselves does the world around us begin to change. There are silent moments when we do nothing at all, just sit, breathe, and feel our own presence. And it is only in those moments that we can realize life is not a checklist of tasks, but a journey of presence. Every time we pause to listen, we draw closer to ourselves. And in that closeness, we discover that everything we search for outside, love, validation, peace, originates from harmony within. Silence, therefore, is not an ending. It is not a retreat from life or a cessation of action. It is a return to our deepest nature so we can live more fully. It is in that stillness that we discover we don't need to try to be someone else. We only need to be ourselves. And from there, we begin to see the world differently. We no longer view life through the lens of lack and desire, but with eyes of fullness and compassion. Silence teaches us that we don't need to hold on to everything to feel safe. We only need to open our hearts to receive life in all its forms. Life is not a race, but a long journey of discovery. Silence is not where we hide or avoid, but where we return to find ourselves again, to remember who we are when there is no judgment, no societal pressure, no expectations from others. In silence, we begin to understand. Every moment is a miracle, and all we need to do is pause long enough to see it. No need to rush, no need to chase. Just be here in this moment, whole enough and complete. In a world where everything is constantly in motion, we may often feel swept up in the current, from work to relationships, from goals to expectations. And sometimes we forget one essential truth. Silence is not the absence of life, but a way to live more deeply and fully. Silence is not a pause or retreat from the world, but a return to ourselves so that we can continue to live, this time in a different way. Not in haste, not in exhaustion, but from a deep inner source of energy. Silence and the ever-moving flow of life form a strange yet deeply authentic relationship. When life feels like it's moving too fast, when we are caught in worries and pressure, silence becomes the place where we return to see what truly matters. Not the goals, not the achievements or the things we've accumulated, but the present moments themselves, the fullness of being in every breath, every step. Life continues, the world keeps turning. But silence gives us the chance to choose how we want to engage with that flow. It doesn't force us to race against time. Instead, it invites us to pause and feel. And from there, we can step forward with clearer minds and more open hearts. Silence helps us see that life is not only about what we do, but how we do it, the energy we bring to each act, the love we express in every moment. And here's something important. Silence doesn't mean disconnection from the world. On the contrary, when we pause to feel, we begin to sense life more deeply in everything around us. The laughter of loved ones, the changing scenery of the seasons, the peaceful pauses amid the chaos, these all become more vivid, more refined, when we know how to stop and truly listen. Silence does not alienate us from the world. It connects us to it on a deeper level. This truth, though simple, is profound. When we slow down and find stillness in our lives, we not only give time to ourselves, but we also allow space to reflect on what we're experiencing, to reevaluate the values we live by, and from there we can act with greater intention and meaning. Silence also helps us realize that life is not a sequence of events to conquer, but a series of precious moments, each one carrying deep value. A peaceful morning, a gentle ray of sunlight through the window, a wordless smile given away. All these are parts of life, but only when we embrace stillness do we begin to truly notice them. Life never stops, that is obvious. But in that unceasing motion, silence helps us not be swept away. It allows us to fully inhabit what is, not in pursuit of something far off, but to be completely present in the now. And when we live like this, life no longer feels like a race, but a meaningful journey where every moment holds a touch of magic. When we come to understand silence, we begin to realize that life is not something to be achieved. Life is what is happening right now in every breath, every movement, every thought. Silence not only helps us feel life, but also cherish it, from the simplest things to the most extraordinary moments. Silence and the unstoppable flow of life are not opposites. They are two sides of the same coin, inseparable. Silence doesn't ask us to stop living. It invites us to live more deeply and truthfully. When we know how to pause and truly feel, we see that life, even with all its twists and turns, is a beautiful and precious journey, because we've learned how to savor every moment it offers. Silence is not only a place where we find peace, it is also the starting point of transformation. When we truly quiet ourselves and let our souls settle, something miraculous begins to happen. Not sudden changes, not dramatic upheavals, but deep, gradual shifts, invisible to the naked eye, yet immensely powerful. When we face life from within silence, we are no longer swept away by chaotic thoughts, by constant anxieties about the future or regrets about the past. What remains is the present, and in that presence, we begin to feel an inner transformation. Old habits, negative patterns of thinking, long suppressed emotions, they gradually rise and fall away, making space for clarity, peace, and love. Silence is not an escape from life's difficulties or challenges. It is how we meet them with a calm spirit. In silence, we can see more clearly what is truly unfolding in our lives. We begin to realize that no problem is too big when we face it calmly, and no fear is unconquerable if we do not let our emotions rule us. In silence, we learn to let go of what no longer serves us: false beliefs, excessive expectations, unhealthy relationships. When we are no longer controlled by the noise of the outside world, we begin to be reborn. Beautiful things begin to sprout within us: love, gratitude, creativity, and freedom. Silence is not a stop. It is renewal, a new beginning from within. Each time we return to silence, we move one step closer to deep transformation. When we master our own mind, when we live fully in our presence, we begin to spark revolutionary changes in our lives. Our relationships become more authentic, our work gains deeper meaning, and we ourselves become the best version of who we are. Silence not only heals us, it helps us grow. It helps us become whole, strong, and true to ourselves. Through these 8 parts of the journey, we have explored the profound dimensions of silence, from misunderstandings about loneliness and fear, to the truth that silence is where we return to ourselves and begin a transformation from within. Silence is not the end of life, but the way to live more fully, more deeply. It is not a retreat, but a presence. It is not just a pause for rest, but an opportunity for rebirth and reconnection with our true nature. Moments of silence are opportunities to listen, to understand, and to change. Life, whether busy or quiet, holds powerful lessons we can only learn through silence. When we stop and listen, we no longer race against time, but live in each moment, whole and complete. When we know how to return to ourselves, we not only find peace, we uncover the strength that has always been within. And ultimately, silence is not a stopping point. It is the beginning, the place where deep transformation begins, where we can recreate ourselves and our lives. It is in silence that we find the answers we could not hear before. From there, we don't just live a meaningful life, we live a life of clarity and freedom. Remember this: silence is not something distant. It is always available in every moment. And when we find it, we find true freedom. Freedom from noise, freedom from fear, freedom from unnecessary burdens. Silence is our deepest connection to ourselves and to life itself. May these reflections help you find peace within and discover the limitless power that silence can bring.